Hello, everybody. I'm Helen, and I teach at the Dorothy Benson Senior Services Center. And today we're going to start our 4-week sewing with knits, a basic knit sewing class. And this is a sewing class. This is a knit sewing class that can be done on a regular sewing machine using a zigzag stitch. So you need to have a sewing machine that has a zigzag stitch. Okay, so before we start, let me tell you what I'm going to do. This is the pattern I'm going to use, and it's just a simple top. And I didn't want to do the one with the fitted sleeve. The sleeve is kind of tight on her, and she's a skinny model. So I'm going to use the one that looks like this. Okay, so is this one? It's not a fitted sleeve. This is all just cut on one piece, okay? And no collar, okay? So, and then it doesn't even have a raglan sleeve piecing either, okay? So on the model, it looks like it's like really drapey, lots of folds. On me, it's not doing that because the model is super skinny, probably a size 0, and I'm not. Okay, so I'm actually wearing the top right now. So this is the actual top, and you can see it's just a simple sleeve. Okay, it's called a cut-on sleeve, and it's kind of drapey, but not really on me. Okay, so it doesn't really, it doesn't have all those folds on me, probably because I fill it out. Okay, now, one of the things after I cut out my knit, one of the things I did was, a good advice. Okay, so when you take your pattern out, it's just impossible to fit it back into the envelope. So I just use one of these, whatever these envelopes are called, and I put my pattern there. But I can also make notes. So I made a note to myself saying that I want my lower back neckline to be higher. Okay, and then I'm going to shorten this top 3 inches. So on the next piece, I'm going to do that. So I can write notes on this. I just tape this on here so I can flip it over and see the back. And then sometimes you might have some special notions or trim or something. You can stick it in this envelope. Okay, so on the pattern, let's see, I'm going to show you what I had to do. This thing is really a wide piece, huge piece. And my fabric was about this much too short. So all I did was shorten the sleeve, which I have to do anyway. So I just folded it and shortened it. I am going to shorten it on the next one. So I'll fold it here where it says lengthen and shorten. Now, this is the back piece. So in order to raise the back neckline, what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach a piece about this much, okay? As we get older, our necks, our backs kind of get rounded, our necks kind of lean forward. So a lot of times the back neckline is really too low for some of us. Okay, now the front neckline is okay. So the back is just way too low for me, okay? So let me tell you a little bit about knits. On the pattern, it says, there's a place where it says your knit has to stretch. Where is it? Okay, so it'll tell you a guide, give you a guide. Knit has to stretch. I already know that this one's super stretchy. It's a rayon. Both of these are rayons. And they have lots of lycra, so it's like super stretchy. So this one is let's see, where's the, okay, so this is like super stretchy. Okay, one of the things about knits, if let's just say this was like a solid knit and you couldn't tell which was the right side or the wrong side, this is a jersey, by the way. It's a knit texture on one side and a purl texture. So if you had a super magnifying glass, you can see the loops on the wrong side. So if you pull a knit, it usually curls to the right side, okay? So if you don't know which is the right or wrong side of the knit, it curls. Once you find out which is the right side and the wrong side, I would take chalk and mark it or put a piece of tape so, you'll keep track of which is the right side or wrong side, okay? So before you sew with knits, what you really need is you need to have either a stretch needle, okay, I don't have a needle in here, or a ballpoint or jersey point needle, okay? You've got to have one of those. And this one comes in different sizes, okay? This is a stretch needle. I mostly use a stretch needle, and I need to buy some online because it's real hard to find these in the store sometimes. So I'm going to stock up on my stretch needles. I have plenty of the ballpoint or jersey needles. Now, the reason why you need two of these is because all knits are not the same. You always want to do a test swatch. If your stitching is skipping, that means you got to change over. Let's say you use the jersey needle. And if your stitching is skipping, you need to switch over to a stretch needle and vice versa. So I stuck a stretch needle in here because I just assumed it was going to work. And then you need to do several tests. So here I'm going to show you the different tests I did. I did different zigzag tests, okay? So, and then you do a test and then you pull it, okay? And if I keep pulling it, the stitches are gonna pop. And then you open it up to see if, you like the way it looks, if you really stretched it. So since this isn't a tight fitting top, I'm not gonna worry about if I really pull it hard, if I can see the stitches. I really can't see the stitches on this one. And then plus the print is busy. One thing about rayon knits, they're usually printed, so it's blank on the back side and it's printed on the inside. If you keep washing this in the hot water or warm water and dryer, eventually it's gonna kind of fade. So you might want to take care of your rayon knits and wash them in like cold water in delicate cycle, okay? Since I'm just making a casual top, I'm not going to worry about that. Okay. And then if it wears out, if this gets faded or something, I'll just use it in my clay studio or, just wear it at home, or I can even shorten it and turn it into pajama tops or something. So, but if I had a super fancy fabric and I would take care of the way I wash it and everything. Okay, so I went ahead and cut out my top, okay? And what I do is always mark the front, okay? I just take a big chalk and just write F on here because you don't have to drag out your pattern and try to figure out which one was the front side and which one was the back side. On this one, it's a little bit easy because the back side actually dips, okay? So this pattern, it has a center seam, okay? So on my top, you see the center seam. And the reason why is because this is not cut on the straight grain. It kind of flares out a little, and that's what gives you that beautiful drape and a nice fit, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and sew this, but let me move my stuff away. And we're just using regular polyester or cotton coated with polyester thread coated with cotton or whatever thread, sewing thread, okay? Mine is Gooderman, and I also have Mettler. And so we'll use that. And my zigzag is, this machine doesn't have numbers on it, so I can't tell you what my zigzag stitching is. I think it's, let me see what it looks like. It looks like it's pretty small. Okay, I know the length is almost 2. I tested and I found out I had to shrink in the length. So, but the width is pretty narrow. It's probably, I'm going to guess that it's probably about a 2. Usually I do a 2.5 and maybe a 1.5 length, but this one I did it this way. Now I did not do the length, the stitch length shorter, because I found out that the presser foot was pushing it so much that it was stretching the knit out, okay? All right. So one of the things you have to be careful is that the presser foot squeezes the fabric so much that your 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 fabric gets stretched out. So what you can do is, and then I'm just going to see if I can show you a sample here. Let's see if I can move this. Okay, that might be better. Okay, so don't go too fast now. What it does is it pushes the fabric and it bulges. So keep your needle down, release it, kind of release that tension. Okay, don't pull it, okay? I'll show you what happens if you pull. If you stretch your fabric, this is what happens. Okay, it just kind of puckers. I don't know if you can see it on this, but it kind of puckers. So it gets wavy right here. Okay. So don't stretch it, release the pressure now and then. So I'm going to check this one. Yeah, I kind of like the stitches. Okay, so let me stitch the first seam. Now this top is going to go really fast. One thing about knits, most of the time, your knit is the cut edge is not going to unravel. Okay, this requires a 5/8 inch seam, so I'm going to go. Actually, I'm going to back stitch a little bit. Okay, make sure it doesn't fall off the table and stretch and all that kind of stuff. Okay, be careful of the neckline that you don't accidentally stretch out the fabric while you're handling it. Okay, so I'm going to sew. Don't go too fast. Okay, I'm going to lower the presser foot. Okay. Now, let's say I was having a lot of problem with it stretching out the fabric. I can put my thumb back here and see how it, I get all that, okay? And that kind of keeps it from, that's probably easier than lifting the presser foot up every time. Okay, so I'll just do it that way. Let's see, yeah, that looks good. All right. I do not run over my pins. I pin it kind of to the side away from the presser foot. Okay. Yeah, you don't want to. Number one, you might hit your pin and ruin your needle. So once again, I let it bunch up. Okay. So the thing about knits is most knits are not going to ravel. The raw edge is not going to ravel. So you don't have to worry about finishing the seam at all. Now, on the serger, it will stitch and you can adjust it and get that super stretchy stitch. But the serger also trims your extra seam. So it's like a one-step procedure. So don't go too fast, okay? Just because your sewing machine goes fast doesn't mean you should go at top speed. If you want to, stitch super fast, then you should get an industrial machine. And those you can go really fast and your thread's not going to snap or anything. They have like special pins that move the fabric around. Okay, always have your presser foot on the highest, your needle at the highest position. Okay, so here's my seam. Okay, it looks pretty good. It didn't pucker. What you want to do is, with the serger, it's like a one-step procedure. But what you want to do is trim it about, I'm going to trim this pretty close, about 1/4 of an inch. Just be careful. Make sure your hand is underneath and you can feel the blade because you don't want to accidentally cut any of the other fabric, the shirt. Okay. So I would just trim this away, and you don't have to worry about the edge unraveling. It's pretty neat. And on this knit, I can get pretty close. If it's a loose weave knit, I can't, I have to do a special treatment for the seam. I can't just, cut real close. I either have to fuse tape on it to keep it from unraveling, if it's a really loose knit, like a Rochelle knit, okay? So that's what I'm going to do, is just trim it. Okay. So that's the center front. Okay. And easy peasy. Okay, let's do the back. So I'm actually going to do this in real time so that you can see how quickly sewing with knits go. And so I'm going to backstitch. My computerized sewing machine automatically backstitches for me. So once again, I'm holding my thumb here and letting it bunch up, okay? And that keeps the knit from stretching out when I sew. Knits are great. If you're young, young people like to have negative ease means like on a woven fabric. On a woven fabric garment, you can't have it skin tight because you need to breathe or you need to be able to move. Well, with knits, you can do negative ease, which means your garment can be tighter than your actual body measurement because the knit stretches. So it's easy to fit knit garments usually. Most knits are easy to sew. Some people have trouble with slinky knits, and usually they're made out of acetate. And they do weigh a lot, even though they're thin, but there's just tricks to sewing with acetate slinky knits. There's also puckered knits, and puckered knits are a little bit more challenging to sew, but it can be done. And I also sew with chunky sweater knits sometimes. Those you do have to take care of, okay? Always use a scrap piece of knit and test your stitching. Okay, so the center back seam is almost done here. Okay, so let's see. On this pattern, I was able to fold the fabric lengthwise in half, but I barely made it, okay? So you can see I had the selvage right there. Anything bigger than the size I use, you probably have to do single layer cutting out. And it's a little bit, what you need is a large cutting space, okay? I went ahead and cut my pattern out last night because, or this morning, because I'd have to expand this table. I'm working a very small space. Okay. So anything large, I have a fold out table and I have to bring that, fold that out, and it's hard to get around it. So I went ahead and pre-cut this morning. Okay, so once again, I'm trimming it and about 1/4 of an inch, pretty close. Okay, so we got the back seam. Okay, now we have to do the side seam, which also includes the underarm. I think I have a shoulder seam on this thing. Yeah, I'm going to do the shoulder seam first. That's always better to do it. So far, this is the back. And here's my center seam. My pattern doesn't match. If I was making something super fancy and important, I will make sure my pattern's matched. I will baste it first and then stitch it, okay? Right now I have to make sure I don't stretch out the neck, which I think I just did. Okay, so I have to match the shoulder seams. That's it, okay. This knit, rayon knit is super, it's kind of weighty, so it drapes beautifully. If I was using just 100% cotton knit, it's not going to drape like this, and I'm not going to have recovery. So it's not gonna be an elegant look at all. If you do use cotton knit, you make sure, you know, it's kind of, it's a jersey knit, you know, it's thin, and that, okay, when you pin, you always want to pin the end right here where the neck is, and then the bottom, all right? But if you have a cotton jersey knit that's pretty thin and has lycra in it, has, you know, and remember that stretch chart on the pattern, and then do the center, all right? All right, you might be able to do a cotton lycra knit, but I think it has to be linen knit would probably be gorgeous. I don't really wear polyester knit because I just get so hot in those, but those would probably drape very beautifully too. The prints on polyester knits are absolutely beautiful. And, you know, polyester is practically indestructible. I don't know if it snags or not. You got it caught on something. Okay, so this is one shoulder seam, and I have to be careful I don't stretch the neck edge out. All right, I'm probably not going to be able to finish this top in this one session. Let me see what time it is. Oh, I might be able to. No, I'll get pretty far. If I was just doing this by myself without, you know, showing you guys, I probably from start to finish an hour. Oops, I forgot to do this. The only part that is going to take time for me is the binding on the neck. The reason why is I like to, I'll sew the binding on, but I like to finish it by hand. And then what that means is instead of putting it in the sewing machine and, you know, when I sew the binding on, I turn it over. I like sewing it by hand, tacking it down by hand. I don't like doing it on the sewing machine. I can't, I do it with the cover stitch, but because the knit is so springy, it's going to wiggle around a lot on the knit. So I don't get a pretty effect. And it doesn't bother me to, you know, sit in front of something watching on the computer and hand stitching. It doesn't take long. It's just a regular slip stitch, slip stitch, whatever it's called. Now, if I did this on the serger, I definitely can whip this out in an hour because I can go faster and it'll trim the seam for me at the same time. But unless you do a lot of sewing and sew a lot of knits, you don't really need a serger. I have sewn swimsuits on the sewing machine with the zigzag stitch. Actually, you have more control with the sewing machine than the serger with swimsuits. Okay, I got to make sure I got the everything here. This is a lot of fabric, so it's kind of hard to see where I'm going with it. Okay, so now let's see. Okay, so this is my shoulder right here. Okay. Yeah, with swimsuit, I think, I do use the serger, but when you're attaching that elastic to the leg opening and arm opening and everything, because the elastic's going to be shorter in length than the um, opening itself, and you have to stretch it as you sew, it will move around on you big time. So on the serger, it's like, because the serger has that knife and cuts, slices and trims as you go along. You can have a lot of accidental slices where you didn't want it. So on the fabric, so especially with leg openings and all that, I'll use the zigzag. It's just easier to control that. I mean, it's so springy, especially swimsuit fabric, because they're really stretchy stuff. And this is, the swimsuit would be the one instance where it's totally negative ease. You don't want a baggy swimsuit, because when it gets wet, the fabric stretches a little bit. And you don't want you don't want a baggy swimsuit when you're in the water. So you're creating a garment that is totally negative ease. It means it's smaller than your body size. Then that way it's tight and it fits really good. Okay, let's go. And this pattern, I didn't read the instructions. I kind of glanced through the instructions, but I'm assuming it's 5/8 inch. But like I said, the knit is forgiving, and this is just a loose top pattern. So I'm not going to worry about fit that much. Okay, I don't know if you can see this. I'm keeping my thumb in the back. And making sure, releasing it now and then. Okay, you never want to pull your fabric through your machine. You just want to guide it so it doesn't go sideways. Now, this might not be precisely 5 inch. I just made that seam allowance a little bit wider, but that's okay. It's still a knit and the pattern is so busy. Okay, let's say that you didn't have much space and this was the edge of your table and your knit was draping over the side. You couldn't, keep it on the table. Go prop up a chair and, because you don't want that knit to stretch and pull. Or put something heavy, so it doesn't like pull on it, okay? All right. Okay, I just sewed the 2 side seams. Now I've got to do and actually I did with the shoulder seams. I haven't trimmed them yet. Okay, I have to be careful I don't stretch out the neckline, which looks huge to me right now. I may have to remeasure and shrink it down a little bit. Okay, now we're going to do the side seam. And the sleeve and the side seam are one piece. We're not inserting a sleeve in this one. You can do it regular t-shirt, insert a seam, and there's the flat method where you just sew it, before sewing the side seam, or if you had a very nice fabric and you wanted a nice end product, you're going to want to maybe even baste it. And the reason why I say baste it is because, like I said, this knit is stretchy and it will move around on you. Okay, so I made sure that I got the bottom and then the top, okay, and then I kind of go like that. And I don't have I didn't mark the notches on my patterns. Will have notches where you match the notches, and I'm just too lazy to do that. It depends on the pattern too. You know, if it's something that I need to really put notches to be careful. I have it. This one's just such a simple pattern that, and I'm going to put a lot that I don't need the notch. I'm going to put a lot of pins on this one because the curve is going to see it's already like moving away from each other. So I'm just going to put a few extra pins where the curve is so it doesn't scoot out on me. Okay. And keeping the pins away from the seam so I don't run over them. All right. And then okay, let me move something here. Now the hem, the sleeve hem, and the bottom hem, I do have the sergers and I do have a cover stitch, so I could finish it by cover stitching, okay? If you don't have a cover stitch machine and you want to do it on the sewing machine, you can do it. And what I would recommend is get a twin needle. And a twin needle, when you sew with a twin needle, let me see. Okay, so a twin needle looks like this, and I actually have a stretched twin needle. That means the tip of the needle is, so we got one shaft here and it goes in. You're going to have to figure out how to thread. My machine has two places to put the spool of thread. Let's see, how do I get this back in? I can't get it back in. Okay, so on my machine, I've got a place where I can put another thread here, okay? If you don't have that, you can rig something up. You can either make a stand, you know, have some kind of a stand with let's see, a stick or a straw. Straws usually kind of fit needle spools. But most machines will have an extra one. Okay, so I pinned the side seam. I'm not going to do the other side. And the reason why is the pins catch. Okay. And it gets confusing. So I'm not going to do the other side. And it looks like I'm going to run out of thread here any minute. Okay, back stitch again. Now on this part, I'm sewing from the bottom hem up. And the reason why is anytime you have a pattern piece, just a general rule, okay, so this is, let's see, here we go. Okay, so here is, okay, here's the grain line, okay? But see how this part slants up? Okay, if you go this way, the fabric gets pushed out and your stitching ends up getting wonky. So you want to go from the fat end to the thinner end, okay? Sometimes, you know, it's not going to be perfect like that, but that's the general rule. Okay, once again, I'm going to hold. So because this is kind of cut like at an angle, this piece right here, it's kind of giving me trouble here. So right now this thumb method works the best. All right. You just have to test whether you need to use the thumb method or whether you need to, drop your needle down and lift your presser foot. Release the tension. Okay, so you just have to make sample tests. You just don't cut out your fabric and then go for it. Always do a test. Let me lower it so you can see it better. There we go. Okay, I'm at the curve under the arm. I'm gonna go a little bit slower because the fabric can stretch and all that. So I'm gonna go just a tad bit slower. Let's say I decided to do a flat felt seam on all of these seams. If you do it as a flat felt seam, and so you'll have extra fabric and then you'll do some top stitching, but still using the slight zigzag method. The seams will get structurally strong, sturdy, I guess. So I think of sewing with fabric as engineering with fabric. You're constructing with fabric and you're seeing where some places can become stiff, some stretchy, some more flexible. Okay. I highly recommend is put the thumb on the back behind the presser foot. Don't accidentally push the lever and, release your presser foot. But just hold on to the fabric. I'm just gonna back stitch on this machine so it doesn't unravel back there. Okay, so I've got one and I'm gonna run out of thread here. All right, now I have to be real careful I don't stretch out the neckline. I'm probably gonna measure the neckline on the pattern and make sure it's still the same size. I could have basted it and keep it in place. I should have done that probably. So it won't stretch out and give me trouble later. When I put the binding on. Okay, so I'm pinning the hem and then I'm pinning the sleeve part. Okay, so this is the last seam. After this, it's just a matter of putting the binding on the neck and then sewing the binding on and then hemming the sleeves and the hem. And I'm going to show the hemming process and the binding process next week because the binding might get a little bit tricky. Okay. Now, some people will sew the binding on before they do all the shoulder seams, they do one shoulder seam and then they'll sew the binding on. But I like to do it once I've gotten both seams down. Now, if it's a fancy knit, if it's a fancy garment, what I do is I actually base the binding on, make sure it lays exactly the way I want it to lay. Because sometimes, the bindings can get wonky. Because I don't want, on a nice garment, okay? Now on pajamas or just simple tops like this, I just kind of wing it. And once in a while I'll get a wonky thing, but nowadays it seems like that's part of fashion, wonky, this and that. Okay, so I'm actually, remember to put a lot of pins when you come to that sharp turn under the arm. because the knit will scoot away from each other. Okay. All right. So the last side seam. Okay, make sure nothing's bunched up underneath. I'm gonna run out of thread any minute on the top. Yeah, always make sure underneath you don't have anything bunched up, because then you have to take that seam ripper out. Not a pleasant surprise. So as you can see, this is going pretty fast because all I have left to do is the binding in the in the hems on the sleeve and the bottom. And it also depends on what kind of knit you have. Okay, some knits, this one I'm used to sewing this kind of a rayon lycra jersey. I know how it's going to behave. But like I said, you got to do some sample swatches. Work out any problems you might have with that special knit. Okay, I think I'm about to run out of thread. Okay. So I've run out of thread. I'm just gonna, oops, I've got a mess here. Just gonna cut this off here. Okay. Let's see. Just use this one. Normally, if you're using one brand, you don't want to mix it with another brand, the spool of thread. I don't have this color. I was using a Gutterman thread, and I don't have this color or even close to it in another spool of Gutterman. So Gutterman or whatever you call it. So this is a Mentler. Mentler tends to be a little bit thinner. The thread's a little bit thinner. So the rule of thumb is you don't want to like mix brands that much, especially the Coats and Clark. Okay. But so one thread is thinner than the other, but you know what? It's okay on this. Okay. If it was like a nice garment I was sewing, I'd be more careful, but talking about, and this shouldn't give me in trouble, problems. The Coats and Clark will give me problems. And I think the reason why is because it's not as smooth of a thread. I think it's like short threads or something, but it's kind of hairy under the microscope. Okay, if you're a beginner sewing knits, it might take you 2 hours to finish a simple top, and always try with a simple top. Don't try to do one with the fitted sleeve. And try not to do a tank top because then you have to put binding on the armhole too. So you don't want to challenge yourself too much when you're first sewing with knits. And you want to have success, so you're always motivated. Okay, so I've got all the seams sewn. So basically, it's just a matter of putting the binding on and hemming it. I will trim all the seams, okay? So I'll trim all the seams and make sure I don't stretch out the neck. I do need to remeasure the neck. It looks awfully wide. Um, I should have, stabilized the neckline with basting thread. And so I'm going to I'm going to hand sew basting thread on the neckline and then lay this on the pattern or measure the pattern and then kind of scoot it into the right place. But I will trim all the seams. So basically, this is done. On this pattern, the back hem is lower than the front, okay? So I'm just gonna cut up the trims and then next week, I'll show you, especially on the curved back hem, I'll show you how to, um, um, let's see, I'm gonna use a fusible tape, okay? Trying to, let's see, sew this. You can hand stitch the hem because this is a loose garment, okay? If it was a tight fitting garment and you hand stitched, something, the threads are gonna pop or it's gonna pull. So this is a loose garment, so you can hand stitch it if you don't want to see any top stitching. I'm gonna show you with the twin needle, okay? And the twin needle is cool because the bottom of the twin needle becomes a zigzag, but you have 2 rows of regular stitching. So it looks like a cover stitch machine and it still has a little bit of give, okay? So this is it. I'm going to trim the seam allowances to 1/4 of an inch. And then when we come back next week, I'll show you how to put the binding on. And we will do the hem at the same time. So I will see you next week.